Well, I think it's 2 p.m. sharp, so I would say, why don't we get started? We can always double back a little bit if others come and need to get oriented. I hope you had a good time up until now, and lunch panel and everything, so Happy New Year. So we're here, I hope you're in the right place, for a panel that we've kind of back and forth calling Dusting Off Old Practices for the AI Era. As you've probably seen throughout the program, there's a lot of things happening in AI in teaching, and we wanted to specifically focus a panel on ways to sort of dust off old-fashioned, dated practices, if we can call it that. I think it's important to understand that a lot of that's going on everywhere, and we have a sampling of this here, both in terms of what we dust off, but also in terms of sort of the stages we're at in dusting them off for the AI era. So I hope you'll use and attend our panel in that way. So the way that I want us to proceed is I'll give a brief overview after we go around with introductions, and then in turn, each of our main speakers, John will speak to oral exams, Liz will speak to her in-class reflective essays, and Kate will share how she has developed documenting research, kind of an old-fashioned way, or an imitated old-fashioned way. And we also have Katherine Mahajan with us, who is newly with CFE. She'll introduce herself. I'm just going to go from Kate to Liz to John in terms of introductions. And then we have time set aside for conclusions. We have a bit of a buffer between 5 and 20 minutes. So if you have an appetite to discuss each one of the modalities, dusted off modalities, so to speak, we can do that at the end of each. Sort of like an interview, I'm going to be asking them questions one by one, or we can reserve more time at the end. So we're somewhat flexible on that, but have set aside sort of 15 minutes per theme. And I wanted to start with Kate and ask her to introduce herself. So what do you teach? Who do you have in your classroom? Sort of give us a quick overview of how you encounter your classroom before we then get to talking about AI.
And the bulk of my job is teaching W1 courses, all right? So I'm in the core, and that is the sequence that first-year students take, the writing sequence. And so I teach the kind of typical 100-101, which is a year-long sequence. And then I also teach a one-semester class 106 for students who have high IB or AP scores, who then just take one semester of writing. So the way that I come to students is they, exit high school, and then they have summer, and then either, on Monday or Tuesday, they see, me, and then of course I see them again in the summer or in the spring as well. So mostly first-year students who are bringing with them the things that they used in high school for success, and how are they going to continue to be successful as writers in the university setting.
Liz, who do you teach? Who do you have before you in your classrooms?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Liz Suhay. I'm in the Department of Government, and I teach at all levels, like this crazy variety. So I will teach first-year students in an Introduction to U.S. Politics class. I teach a senior capstone class at the 400 level, and then I also teach PhD students. And the method, some of the methods that I'm going to talk to you about today, I am trying to use in all of those classes at all of those levels. And so, fingers crossed, the first-year students are next up. So hopefully it will go as well as it's gone with the others.
And then John, who do you find in your classrooms?
First challenge is to turn the microphone. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah. So my name's John Heath. I came back to teaching at AU after retiring from the World Bank in 2015. I teach a master's level course in professional development management, and most of my students they often have Peace Corps experience, and the focus is on teaching them about project management principles and how they relate to specific projects.
And then Katherine, please introduce yourself. So Katherine is entirely new at AU, but first test, finding McKinley 100, you clearly succeeded at that. So tell us who you are and how you're going to be working with faculty at AU.
Yeah, definitely. Hi, everybody. I'm Katherine Mahajan. I am the new Instructional Technology and AI Manager at CFE. So the whole CFE is always there for y'all, and especially in my office. Like, please come. My goal is to help discuss, find tools, build tools, collaborate to create tools for y'all, resources around how AI can be integrated or even not integrated, which is why it's kind of exciting to be on this panel, because I think we hear AI and we think, oh, we have to do it, but it's not always necessary, and it's nice to be a part of this discussion.
Thank you. And so Katherine also takes consultations. So do I. I currently work with CFE, the Center for Faculty Excellence, as an AI associate with regards to course design, instructional design, but also academic integrity code. So I work with Alison Thomas in that regard. I'm dispatched there about 1 day a week, so I'm not always around. Katherine is, and the two of us work together on these issues. So let me give you a brief overview of why we came to this topic and how we considered these dusting off practices. And on the right-hand side, you see an article, and I must insist, this article was published after we called it dusting off. The article actually talks about dusting off, so I felt validated. The problem that we all encounter are the fundamental challenges that are posed by AI in the classroom, I should say generative AI in the classroom, related to the instructors' and students' understanding of it and the use of it, and also, and I insist on saying also, cheating. So I don't think that should be the center of it, but that is also what we encounter, especially when it comes to assessments, stuff that they submit for us to give them grades. And as a solution, we have, kind of a reflex to respond, to our desire to diminish cheating, among other things, through AI. And we want to instead, and the better way to put this is cognitive offloading, that we would like students to do less AI, whether it is for their assessments, assignments, and activities, whatever they do, but more authentic work and more work to actually grow their brains. And I think that's true at all the levels that Liz mentioned. As part of what some call friction fixing, that we make it harder to use AI, one way to do that is to sort of reach back, go sit back down at your desks, do things the old-fashioned way, the disconnected, plugged out, unplugged way. And so the dusting off known practices are, a way to quickly and feasibly do something that we may all, in fact, some of us may be especially familiar with. And so that's what we thought was interesting to consider here, with the goal to consider some examples here to do this and to ponder the limitations, the pitfalls, the promises, of course, but also the limitations and pitfalls of doing that, of just kind of doing things the old school way, and how we could bring some of that into the future. And so on the panel here is a sampling of such ways to dust off and kind of reconsider things that we already know. None of us, I would say, are experts necessarily. We are experts in teaching, but none of us are experts in any one of these practices, not even in AI in general. We're all on a steep learning curve, and I think that is what makes the Ann Farron Conference so strong, is that we bring this together. So I want you to kind of think along, tell us what else you can think of. The reason we do this is it's convenient. So those old-fashioned practices, offline, on paper, by hand, in person, disconnected from automatic so-called intelligent tools, is a convenient way to quickly respond. It's familiar, it's tested, old is what we know, and we as faculty, of course, know. Students sometimes do, sometimes don't, but we certainly know what we're in for, and we are readily available in a time of crisis. When things are rapidly moving, these tested practices, old quote-unquote practices, feel safe. in a time of volatility, and they are deployable, scalable. We can learn from one another how to handle them. We're familiar, we can, if we say oral exams, we sort of know mostly, and some of us, and I definitely have, gone through a lot of oral exams, so why not, It's effective. It does stem, provenly, the cognitive offloading. It helps build muscle, and I think that's really important. It slows students down. It also, and again here my stressing on, also prevents cheating and AI misuse, but it does a number of other things. And so I want you to kind of think about those things as well, even though we focus it here on AI. Last but not least, and I think that's really important, it's popular. Students want us to find so-called AI-proof methods of assessment. And when interviewed, when surveyed, they say so, because they feel it's fair, it's safer for them, and they want us to respond in that way. Maybe other practices as well, but practices that they feel and perceive as they're AI-proof, they're safe, I can show what I know, and many students really appreciate that. So what practices are being offloaded or off-dusted, I should say, dusted off? So some have, toggled back to in-class, so-called blue book exams, whether they're proctored or actually, handled in class. Some, and that's what we have here, consider oral exams. Some of those are handled in person, face-to-face. Others have considered them remotely, or other type of oral demonstrations, one should say, kind of think poster presentations or role plays live, or presentations more broadly fit into that broader realm. Guided annotations, whether live in class is something that's also resurging, like literally put your phones away, take your paper out, here's markers, and let's annotate, sometimes also in social annotation, sort of together settings. The collaboration can be a way to stem AI if that's our main purpose. Any unplugged reflections, journals by hand, and we'll see Liz talk to that, electronically also, and Kate also speaks to that, that we ask students to sort of physically or physically document the stuff that they're actually looking at. And then, of course, live PowerPoint or poster presentations, that too, fits into the realm. We do that already, but kind of doing more of that, dusting practices off specifically for the AI purpose is part of what we strive for. So let me ask others in turn from here on out a little bit what they do. And I've asked them, I will start with John, how they are considering, and I keep advancing the wrong screen, sorry here. I need 3 screens at least, huh? So John, what challenges stemming from AI use in the classroom have you experienced, and how do you feel they impede your instruction?
Well, as I said, I teach a course on development management. And what I shall be doing, and what I'm about to describe, is an experiment that will be conducted this semester, so I don't have the results yet. And for that reason, I'd be very happy to receive any suggestions. This coming semester, I have a small group of 8 students, and the size is critical in this case. And they'll be divided into 2 teams. And in the course of the semester, they will be required to develop a project, social and economic development project. And so to help explain, I should outline the grading procedure. They will be required by the end of the semester to each team will submit a project document. Now, as they're working as a team, the grade for that part of the assignment, for that part of the course, which accounts for 50%, will be 1 grade per team. So all students in a team get the same grade. Now, obviously, that creates a problem in terms of free riding, because we know that some students pull more weight than others. And so for that reason, I wanted to ensure that the other 50% of the grade be specific to each student, 30% of the grade will be based on a written exam with no access to technology, using the Canvas software that I believe, I haven't used it yet, but I'm told that you can block out access to the internet while in the classroom doing the exam. And 20% of the grade will be based on an oral exam. Now this is only going to work because, as I said, it's a small group. And an oral exam by definition I think should be at least 30 minutes. And it'll be spread in my case over the course of a week. It'll be in person. I've identified a windowless closet in the basement of Hurst Hall where I propose, no, I'm joking. But yes, I mean, I can't do it virtually because there was a case recently of an Oxford entrance exam which was done virtually, and the interviewee said to the professor, "Oh, could you repeat that question? The computer didn't pick it up." You really have to, I think it needs to be in person. Now, one thing that's important to note is that obviously if the students, sometimes my students, most of them are often from other countries, and so oral fluency in English could be a problem. But in this particular group, none of them come from non-English speaking countries. And I've interviewed them before the beginning of the semester, so I know that they all have adequate oral fluency in English. So that's reassuring. Let me just say something about the exact procedure I'll use, and I want your advice on this, because there are two options. One would be that before the end of the semester, a week before the exam, the oral exam, I tell the whole class that there are 20 questions that will be, from which, will it be 3, will it be 5? I don't know, I have to think about this. Either 3 or 5 questions will be posed in each interview. And the thing is, the student won't know in advance which questions out of the batch of 20 questions they will actually have to handle. So they do need to be familiar with the 20 questions in advance, right? That will give them some sense of security, I think, going in, because they know exactly what areas they're going to be tested on. Alternatively, Claude, who I consulted this morning, advises me that maybe I should, in the interests of fairness, ask exactly the same questions to all the students and have an element of nuance in my questioning, so that essentially, let me give you an example. In one area in project management is something called SWOT analysis, where you identify the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats associated with a particular project design. And so there are 3 tiers that you can approach this. First of all, you start with the foundational level, where you assess the student's general familiarity with the principles of SWOT analysis. Second tier or level is in relation specifically to the project that they have been working on over the course of the semester, and get them to explain what particular strengths, for example, emerged in the design of this project, or what were the weak points. And then the third tier, the most advanced tier, will be to ask them to think of how they might apply, based on what they've learned, how in a totally new project they might modify their approach in order to come up with a better project design. So I welcome your suggestions as to which of those 2 options should be preferred. Thank you.
Thank you. I do want to follow up with a question. Can you articulate for us and for those in the audience how you came to consider oral exams with regards to thinking about AI? Why did you land there? What are you hoping that oral exams will do for you that maybe can counteract some of the difficulties you've countered thus far? Just that nexus of AI and oral exams and what we hope to achieve.
Well, I've been teaching here since 2016, and I've been an adept user of ChatGPT since 2022 when it came out. And I've noticed that since AI was introduced, the standard of writing of my students has mysteriously become, progressively better. And other colleagues have voiced the same observation. And so, in fairness, I don't think I can grade students fairly by giving them the take-home written assignments which I used to do. And so that's why I've come around to oral exams. And the other aspect of it is that, these are people who are just about to go out into the professional world, and they're going to be facing lots of one-to-one interview situations. They're going to be put on the spot by their boss in various situations. So they need to be orally fluent and able to think on their feet. So in that sense, I think that the oral exam is actually going to prepare them for that life.
Katherine, I wonder if I can bring you in, and we have Katherine here a little bit as an expert. I don't know if you have any reactions to like doing exams or oral exams and like sort of the tech aspect maybe of it. I know you're proficient in Canvas up and down, and are there ways that we can support or any other reactions that you have to this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the oral exams make complete sense. I mean, at the end of the day, like there's no one perfect tent, right, for assessments. You have to really look at what is the skill, the learning outcome, what is the specific grading opportunity, and does that skill also in the real world exist in isolation, right? Somebody who has to be able to think on their feet, deliver, like a doctor being in the room has to know off the top of their head and be able to deliver that information. If you're going and doing research analysis, we all go and look up references, right? So which skills are we assessing and how isolated is that? Because I think there's always room for a scaffolded approach of, okay, at the beginning, even for the oral exam, maybe it's okay for students to leverage AI as they're practicing, right? Or getting tips or advice. But then they're still gonna be tested on thinking on their feet, on responding, on delivery, putting everything into their own words. So I think there's many different approaches, and it's really dependent again on the specific grading opportunity or the sequencing that you want. Do you want students to start off leveraging AI and then weed out of it? And I think another good approach of thinking is really looking at what is the activity you're asking them to do, what is the process they already use, and if you've already noticed them using AI in that process, how do you combat that, or how do you kind of embrace it and make it clear to them where it's okay and where it's not?
Yeah, thank you. Liz, may I briefly bring you in? I know, Liz, we asked her to speak to in-class annotations, but that she uses in class live by hand, etc. But you've also run oral exams. What are some of your did you not, or Kate, was it you? Somebody said, okay, neither one of them, okay. Well,
so I do. Yeah, so I mean, I do in-class exams. So I have transitioned to doing in-class exams. So maybe that's what you were thinking about. I'm one of these folks who, I would say I have become an anti-AI professor. Not that I don't use it in my own life. Not that I don't think that it is, that we shouldn't have any classes that involve AI. But there's such enormous pressure right now on students to use AI. We can go into that later. I don't want to get too off track, but so I find myself in this position where I think I'm more anti-AI than I otherwise would be, because I see these pressures on the students. I basically think that it's nearly impossible to give a paper outside of class where you're not going to have most of your students using AI more than you think that they should. Kate has a great way of combating that. But I've transitioned to having almost all of my assessments be in class. And so this semester for my first year students, this coming semester, we'll have 3 in-class exams. I've done them with Blue Books in the past, but now I'm using Canvas Lockdown Browser. You should always practice with it, with the students beforehand, before the stakes are high. Recommend that. But otherwise, it works very well.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I do want to leave it briefly. I feel like you're all kind of sitting back and say, I want to hear the whole sampling before we sort of engage in all these other dusted off practices. But if that's not strongly the case, and I see you're leaning forward, I will build that in. Otherwise, I'd love to call on Liz to talk more about your essay writing or sort of reflective essay writing in class experience that you have engaged in to slow your students down and to ask them to deliver authentic work on their feet.
Yeah, so, in-class exams that I just talked about, in many respects, I think this is a no-brainer. I think a lot of people are doing it. It's basically like an anti-cheating mechanism. It's not very interesting in some respects. So what I'm doing that's more interesting in the classroom, that is both intended to prevent AI use, but also has some other benefits that I'll tell you about, is having students once a week at the beginning of the class engage in reading reflections, which are handwritten reflections on the assigned readings that they do just on notebook paper. You could potentially use a lockdown browser for this as well. And I came to this because it occurred to me as kind of the next step after realizing students were using AI to write their essays. I realized, oh gosh, they're also using AI to do the readings, right? To give you like a quick little nutshell summary. And I don't know about you all, but I often cannot catch this. Like if I do a lot of conversation in class and you're asking people what the thesis is, what the evidence was, they can get all that very, very easily from an AI. So these reflections are meant to basically force the students to provide me with some detail, right, which is evidence that they've done the reading, which then is the carrot or the stick or however you want to think about it to get them to do the reading. So there are, I do think that this works fairly well. I've tried it in 2 different classes so far. I want to talk about some of the benefits that that might not be obvious. So, the most important thing is this is generally a nudge to get them to do the reading. It is something so it encourages students to do the reading who wouldn't have otherwise do the reading. For the students who always do the reading, it encourages them to be more careful readers, and it gives them a greater sense of fairness, right? That they're now being rewarded, like there are all these slackers, right? They know, and the slackers get by, and that pisses people off, but now they're actually getting rewarded. They get points when they do the readings. And this also has benefits with respect to just the quality of the class. So my experience, I should have done this ages ago, regardless of AI. Everybody's doing the readings more carefully. So now your conversations in class are better. Students are actually gaining more from the readings. At the beginning of class, then, they're also going through this step of kind of processing and thinking carefully about the readings and creatively, and then we can have better conversations. So the last thing that I would say, I was nervous about this. It's 15 minutes at the start of class. It's a big chunk of time. And this works probably if you do like hour 15-minute classes. It probably doesn't work as well for the shorter classes, but maybe you could have kind of short reflections. But I was nervous about my teaching evaluations, what they're going to be at the end of the semester. I can tell you so far, this is PhD students and then juniors and seniors, my teaching evaluations have gotten better. And I've had nobody complaining in the qualitative comments beyond like, well, I was intimidated by the reflections at first, but they got better and I understand why the professor's doing them, right? So, I can't guarantee, but I can tell you my experience has been positive. There is one caveat here, which is that I grade them pass-fail. I don't grade hard. So the idea is, I just want to know you did the reading, basically. And so, maybe some students are able to fudge it, but I do think it's important to not be too tough with the grading, or else you might have a little rebellion on your hands. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. So you mentioned that they see it as fair, that they have thereby not only have more friction to use AI and misuse AI on their feet at home and to actually, quote, unquote, do the readings. There's apparently entire websites that sort of, harp on that, IHateReading.com or something like that. Then you can counteract that. What are some limitations? You mentioned time. What are some caveats that you see on the horizon for yourself, even if the students don't mention it? What do you feel like are some of the downsides, some price that you pay or risks that you encounter?
I mean, I do think that there are some students who, feel nervous about this. I do think that students get over it. I'll tell you one very practical limitation is people who have extended time. Okay, so there's a way to handle this, which is, if there's anybody in the room who knows all the rules and regulations about this, they can tell me if I'm wrong. But basically, they're not timed, right? So I'm just take as long as you want. And then usually, if there's somebody who has extended time or somebody who's always a straggler, you have them finish in the hall. And, it's meant to be low stakes. It's meant to be maybe 10 minutes, and some people will take longer. So it's...
somebody with a disability accommodation? Is that the idea?
Yeah, so they'll have extended time. And, and so and I've worked on this for a while, and I've done this before with pop quizzes as well, and I haven't gotten any pushback, which is they're not timed. People take as long as they need, and then if you do have somebody who's taken egregiously long, you can just ask them to finish in the hallway. But it hasn't been a big issue for me. So I think that's probably the main tricky thing to work on.
In the spirit of sampling here and getting some exposure, may I ask you, Kate, what challenges stemming from AI you've run into and how you came to consider research archives as a response to that?
Okay. So I feel like there was a kind of definite break a couple of years ago, and I saw it in an online asynchronous class that I was teaching, where suddenly I could see that students were not doing the homework themselves. And there were some things that I could get into, mostly having to do with page numbers, things like that, where they just weren't doing it anymore. All right, and I started to then see more papers where sort of the link between their paper and their sources was pretty tenuous. At some point in time, it didn't even really exist. All right, so. But then I also know that students were using AI in ways that I would think of being more responsible. I mean, I don't think it's the worst place to start getting going on things, or to help them with certain sorts of things that they know that are kind of problematic for them. So the question for me was how do I take all of these things that I don't like, that I think are pushing against my responsibilities as somebody who's teaching them how to do academic writing, and get them to focus on some of the things that I think that's really important. That's really important that they know what they're doing, that they know how to find sources, they know how to read sources, they know how to incorporate sources ethically into their materials. So that was what I was seeing, and I can't say I quite went back to a practice, because I've kept this one up pretty much off and on through many, many years. I can talk about that in a second. But I did kind of soup it up some. So, yeah.
I mean, back to a practice, I remember the time I had to submit to my professor or my teacher my work with all the aspects and materials and evidence attached.
Yeah.
And so that's in a way what you're doing.
Yeah.
You're telling them, give me your archive, but you're asking of them, and I have it played up here if you want to show.
Okay. So,
if you want to show a little bit how
let me talk to you
actually
where this comes from, how I use it. So this is actually something that we did in graduate school with Dr. Rosemary Winslow, who is at Catholic University, and she would have us, we were TAs, she'd have us have the students turn in their papers, and they also had to turn in, as you were saying, their research material. So at that point in time, like, it was hard copies, right? So the paper that they, or the, a copy of the page that they drew from, highlighted, and they would turn that in with them. And to sort of like demonstrate my age for all of you, I think this had a couple of different purposes. One is because my career spans also like pre-internet to internet. So it was a sense of like, okay, how are students using sources, right? But also, this gives you a good sense, not just as a kind of a cheating, like detecting cheating mechanism, but something that does really show you, oh, okay, are students paraphrasing? Are they being accurate to a source? Are they doing all these different kinds of things? So I started from what I would say a kind of pedagogy learning sort of standpoint, which is what are my issues with generative AI? What do I not want them to be doing? What do I want them to learn? How do I want to be able to detect when they are using generative AI in their paper in a really kind of real way that doesn't involve some of the other things that are more ethically challenging? And also by what I'm about to describe to you in a second, ways of creating friction. So this term is not mine, it's Katherine Savini's term, so that even if a student flat out had ChatGPT write their whole paper, they're going to learn something, damn it, from my class, that I think is going to be helpful. All right, so I've called this thing many different things, and the most recent one is calling it a research archive, because I think an archive is like a real thing. I don't think this. I know an archive is a real thing out in the world, and what I'm asking them to do resembles that. So actually, if you want to go back to the first one just for a second, like the non-link, just the slide.
The slide.
Yeah. So this is what I have them do, and it's attached to their final research project, and we work on it for quite a while. So they have to document in this archive the things that they used in their paper. And then, okay, go ahead, if you want to show the sample again. This is an old one from a few years ago, and so you can see kind of what it looks like. So, so the citation, citation one, and then the citation, and then a little screenshot of where they pulled their information from. So, and they turn this in at a couple of points. All right. So, how has this been useful to me as a teacher? So in the pro-learning part of it, that I think is kind of maybe, as you say, the more, not just the anti-cheating, but the like, what is this really doing for them kind of thing. It really makes them keep track of their research. They have to keep track of where things are coming from. They have to keep track of how they're using them in their papers. Research becomes something that's not a kind of abstract, well, I type in some things and then some other things kind of like come out. Keep in mind, I'm teaching first-year students, right? So like, maybe this would be different if you were teaching, upper division students. How am I using this? Am I going to choose to paraphrase? Am I going to use this source ethically? It's right there. They have to think about it. It's like a document full of objects, like an archive that is there, all right? So I think that's important. It keeps research from being this kind of, and citation, from being a kind of like weird little add-on at the end, all right? So, well, I've kind of, said the things I want to say, and now I better go find some research, and I better like stick some citation in there. They have to be thinking about this kind of the whole time, all right? Because they have to collect it for me. What else are they doing when they do this? It creates a lot of friction for the student who simply wants to use generative AI to write their papers, because, I mean, I could defend this, but hopefully I don't need to, why I think a student might need to know how to use library materials, incorporate sources, make ethical decisions, make things work together. It's pretty tough because I think, as probably most people know, at least at this point, and the way that a lot of generative AI is working for this kind of purpose, when students go back, they realize, oh no, this isn't really in the source, or the source is hard to find, or oh no, this is a 400-page PDF and I don't know what page it came from. But they have to go and find these materials. So that friction to kind of like do the thing that I think is valuable to them and not slide into the other thing is there. And I guess I think to myself that even if a student was kind of engaging in some of this behavior,
they have to go find that source. They have to read it at least some. They have to figure out where it's coming from in the source. So I think they're still getting something out of this that's real. And then, of course, I mean, in the sort of like AIC less happy part of this, they are really creating for you the path. They cannot do this, I think, if they've engaged in this kind of behavior. It's almost impossible to do. So it puts kind of like a limit there that I think is that's kind of good. So that is what I do. I've done this for a long time in various ways. I now do it electronically. I don't think students mind it so much. I think they are relieved to have somebody helping them sort of see the value of these things. And also, since we no longer have to print things out, it's not like they have to print out this giant, 25-page thing that in the past was kind of a pain. It all gets submitted electronically. And it's like I think it's also super useful to me as a teacher, and I've heard that from others as well, which is that I can look at their paper and I can look at their sources, and like this is really useful for me. Or how are students learning? What are some things that have changed about students' behaviors? Oh, okay, I need to think more about paraphrasing, or searching. Like once again, that's something that needs to be I need to pay a little bit more attention to that. Maybe move some things to class that I'd moved off to them doing for homework. It's super, super useful to see how students are thinking about and using the materials that they're finding. So it's really great for me as a teacher as well. So I have found it very, very useful for them, for me, for kind of reinforcing the ways in which I want them to be approaching a research and writing process. So.
This reminds me so much of my old-fashioned little cards. My teacher told me to do exactly that on little note cards, and I had them all, lined up physically, like the way our old card system worked in the library. That's how old I am. So there's a lot of dusting off going on here. I would want to ask you, though, have you run into any? Clearly, the students aren't pushing back on that. Maybe you have had a chance to look at evaluation, see if any students remark on that, or any caveats, any limitations that you feel like we should keep in mind.
Let me think. So, haven't looked at evals, but I've done this for a lot of years, and I do ask students about it. How on the last day, it's like, okay, what did you think about this? And students, I think, generally find it valuable and not much of a burden if they've been doing their own work, right? If they haven't, those are the students who complain. They're like, oh, I have so many citations, and now I have to do this. It's like, well, I told you from the day I handed this assignment out that you were going to have to do these things. And you can kind of see it's because some of the work hasn't maybe been their own or totally their own. So there's that. But I mean, it is another piece of work, so you do have to give them credit for it. So I give it, I think, 5% or something like that. And it's very much like almost pass-fail. Did you do these things? Can I understand it? It works out that way. I would say I do it in this kind of formal way because I want to see on paper some of the habits of mind and learning outcomes that this class has. Not everybody's going to want to do something like this. I think there are ways to streamline it. So if you didn't want to collect that kind of document, you could do it in shorter ways. You could just have students cycle through your office. If you have not so many students, they could bring their materials with them. There are probably ways to shortcut this that maybe would be good for folks who aren't teaching a writing class. But yeah, I mean, I've kind of I will not do it for a while, maybe 3 or 4 semesters, and then I'll kind of miss it, and then I'll go back to it, and then I learned some things too. So I mean, I learned lots of things from looking at this. So yeah, but I mean, it is another thing you're asking them to do. So you can't really ask them to do it just do it. You got to give part of the grade to it, I think, because it's labor, and it is something else that you have to look at. Right, and so I mean that makes a difference. If you have 20 students, well, okay, it doesn't make that much difference. But I usually have 60, so that's a difference. It's more, it's something else I got to make sure I sort of put into the sort of the work lineup when I'm thinking about the end of the term. So.
And maybe a footnote here is also to say that what you're demonstrating is one form of feasible way of documenting work. That's a whole other topic I think that's coming up increasingly in the realm of AI is disclosures, please document your work, and then students send you these reams and reams of things that they did in AI, and there's no feasible way. You have just demonstrated a somewhat feasible way. I wonder, Katherine, may I call on you here? I'm sorry. See if you have any thoughts on, like, I know, like, how we manage that. Are there other ways? Are there tips or something like that you could give the audience to consider, of like, if we want to do something like this, but this isn't exactly because you're not doing a writing class, or, are there ways that we can compel students, kind of, again, with this idea of creating friction, to just churn it through an AI tool, but rather having to follow through with the different notes and ways to document work, and having to sort of screen grab or whatever we do? Like, can you think of things that we should consider?
Well, I mean, I really love this. I also used to have students do like research maps as well. But, as a fun addition, if it were me doing it and I wanted to make my life easier in the grading process, then I'd leverage AI. But like, so, or if I were a student, like as you were kind of speaking, I was like, oh man, because I always think about this, and I would even tell my students, before I had this job, I was a professor since 2016, so I've been where y'all are, and don't you hate it when you lose files, or you lose like some research you did in the past, and it's like, oh, I wish I could like go back, right? And with like things like Miro, for example, like Miro have any of y'all used Miro? Yeah, okay. If you love physical Post-it notes, you'll love Miro, because like Miro's awesome. But there's like even a primitive, not crazy primitive, not dial-up primitive, but there's primitive AI built in. So it's like, oh, I could, if it were me, like, hey, I've turned this in, but now I could go and make individual kind of note cards in my Miro board, and then AI can go in, and if it's maybe a year or two later and I kind of want to pop back in just from the student's perspective, I can kind of ask it, wait, where did I write this, or which topic, like what were the main keywords I used in that were coming out. So I think there's ways, again, like where you kind of like parrot. The main assessments have a lovely firewall against AI, right? And I think that's great. And then it's like, well, how can we just leverage some AI tools if people want to continue learning or document, or again, if you want to like grade it or use it as an assessor of just pulling out the average themes coming up in works. Again, it's hard to give a universal answer because every field's different, right? In the needs, but yeah.
But I could also see this being built in and out with, say, I don't know how many of you compel your students to use something like EndNotes or Zotero or something like that. I worry initially that this would sort of pull them out of that and say, oh, I need to have these screen grabs, and that's all that counts for this professor, when in fact maybe we do want them to develop like a Zotero or EndNotes note bank. But increasingly those tools allow you to insert screen grabs and take out quotations, etc., and organize them in a bibliography and build a bibliography. And so this wouldn't hamper them if at the same time you teach them how to plug these screen grabs in, or then use them in a Miro visual board, or then plug them in to really sort of document their work durably, not just like, I need this for this professor, but here are habits I'm building that allow me to keep track of my work, and sort of this is just the output in the way that you require it. So I do want to...
Notebook LM,
there's
would
that
also
too.
be
Notebook
really
LM, Notebook LM.
Yeah.
I'll ask you, because I mean, this is like, in the end, this is kind of what you want. You want them to not kind of, but that research is kind of like it's a real thing. It's traceable. It's like it exists out there somewhere in the world. And I do this, but it would be lovely if then they had that someplace else that would be easier for them to access. Because I do recognize, like, they still think in compartments, and that's fine. So, but maybe this would be useful, and then they have it all together in one spot. Yeah. So.
I want to open it up. I think I see a hand go up there. Maybe in the blue, in the front. No, sorry, in the light blue shirt, and then the green sweater, and then the blue sweater. And you have to remind me of your names. Go ahead.
Sure. Stephen, I'm in Cobat School, first year, kind of second time I've taught this class, cybersecurity governance. For John, a question on the oral exams. Are they defending a paper, or is it a just questions based on the semester's readings? Before you go, for Liz,
Okay, well, short answer. In the course of the semester, the two teams have to develop a project document which lays out the design of the project and how it will be implemented. And so the oral exam will test how familiar they are with the reasoning behind the production of that project document.
So it is so old school. So what I'm doing, so they pull out notebook paper and I collect them immediately, and then I grade them in batches. And it's a really easy grade. I know it is extra work, but it's easy to grade because they're pass-fail, so you can get through each one in just pretty much a minute. But I have heard about people doing something more like journals. I like to collect them each time because I'm very much into, it's a monitoring system. I'm being authoritarian, essentially. But journals are a possibility, and I actually have done that in the past. And so I think, like, if you want something that's more of that nature and don't want to cut down on the admin, that's a possibility. I also want to mention a different approach that I read about. So I hadn't known about anybody else who had done something like this. And then I just happened, like a week ago, to read a professor who is doing a slightly different approach, which is the professor has every student, I think in a more journal type way, do a reflection at the end of every single class. So if the class meets twice a week, doing it at the end of class, 10 minutes. And it's meant to be, I think, more of like an engagement exercise. And so, they, reflect on like what's happened during class and their own thoughts. And I don't, know if there are prompts or not. But that's, another way to think about this as an engagement exercise. One thing I didn't mention is I do give the students specific prompts. I can see kind of a more open-ended way of doing this, but I give them specific prompts, and I try to make them not easily guessable, so that again, encouraging them to do the reading. So something, a general prompt, but one that is not so general that they could prepare for it with AI.
One thing I've done, which I think is also right, you don't want them to prep, you want them to do it in the moment. I taught an honors class for the first time in the fall, and I had them do, I think I called it like a research journal. And so they would do writing in it in class, so they couldn't really prep. And if I really wanted to read it, I had them copied and pasted into Canvas, and then I could sort of take a look at it. But yeah, all right. Did you ask me about extra time? Yes, yeah, I would say. I'm teaching writing, so to me, that's not a big deal because it's kind of just into the whole spirit of what I'm trying to get them to do. But I think if you were going to do something like this, right, you'd have to spend some time explaining it to them, and I think you would want to check it at some point in time before they handed in a final copy of it, because I think the hard thing for them is moving from like a works cited list, so alphabetical order, to the order in which things appear in the paper. So you do want to make sure that they're doing it the way that you want them to do. So I would say, yeah, it probably does take some time. It's going to take not tons, but a little bit to explain it, go over it. And then give them a chance to, do it at the end. It's just so built into what I do. I don't think about that so much, but if you were implementing it in a different place, I think it would, yes, so.
Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mehdi Orang. I'm a professor of computer science. As far as artificial intelligence is concerned, I guess 40 years I taught about it. I took classes with that, and then I encourage even my students to use them. Now, of course, in a positive way, and in fact, one of the things that we talk about is a responsible AI, basically. My research is on breast cancer. So I even use ChatGPT, look at this, see, what it can find out what it says, basically. But what it says is far away from the solution or anything like that. I want to build the model, machine learning, to look at the data and be able to see that who is at risk for breast cancer recurrence, or how long they're going to be surviving that. Another new thing, I've published, of course, a lot of things. The new things that we are looking at called explainable AI. It means machine learning is sort of a black box. It tells you, well, you're going to have, 3 years to survive, breast cancer. But explainable AI is a new component we're trying to put in there to explain to the patient why this is happening to her, basically, that kind of thing. So the students know that, of course, our computer science students are different. They are building the things, and therefore it's not like asking, what is good about artificial intelligence or how do I use it for, voting or something like that. They build the model and therefore they do programming, but they look at it, AI tools as a tool, generally as a tool, basically. So I know that, I'm not looking for general.
And that's good to know, and I think that's a little bit what I think is interesting about this panel as well, is that we are trying to show that these practices that we continue, they inscribe themselves into old habits, and we call it dusting off because they feel old-fashioned, old school, but they also feel very familiar, like AI's research has been going on for decades, and so I think it's important to see the continuity and not everything as completely disruptive and totally new. I did have a question. Go ahead.
I guess this is important. I want to make sure our students understand the benefit of that. Again, I'm reviewing a lot of papers, for different journals. They ask me to do that related to that. And I see that a lot of people are doing research using the artificial intelligence. So I don't want to discourage our students. We just make sure we teach them the capability of AI and the limitation, and it falls down over to us.
I'll leave that to other panels to accomplish. So I feel like that's part of sort of where we drew purposefully the line, that we said, well, we want to show you some ways of like making it harder for them to abuse, I think, AI more than, whether it's in a context of banning it or in the context of enabling it, but to sort of, use these practices to curtail, to stem the abuse, misuse, the shortcuts, the cognitive offloading, as some call it, of AI. But go ahead, other questions, input, ideas?
Sonja, and I'm give you a little context. Teaching class this semester that I last taught in 2015, so I'd say it's pre-AI. Economic history, which part of my break is actually doing a lot of reading, trying to remember what this stuff is about. So one question for this, and a question for the whole panel. So the reflections on the readings is interesting. Do you assign it to the whole class? I mean, do you have the whole class, or just like, a couple students do reflections on the reading each time they meet? That's the one question.
So, so I have to admit that this has been easier for me the past 2 semesters when I've tried this out, because I had both classes were meeting in a block, once a week in a block. So, so I was able to do it actually every single class for all the students. This coming semester, I'm doing sessions that are hour 15 minutes, and I'm going to assign the reflections to all the students, but it doesn't feel right to take as much time in every single class. So I'm going to do it once a week when I probably will have an update as to how I do this at the end of next semester, but I'm probably going to do it on the day when we have more in-depth readings as opposed to the textbook, if that makes sense. So once a week. But yeah, all the students do it, and and so far it's gone well. And I think that if there's a concern about time, you can potentially shorten the time. I had the PhD students writing up to 20 minutes, the seniors, maybe 15 minutes, and you could potentially do it, maybe even a shorter exercise of something like 10 minutes. But inevitably, it does take a chunk of time.
Questions I have too. This is for anyone in the panel. Like I said, last time I taught was 2015, and I'm doing old school exams, but I am having a term paper, 10-page term paper. Right, so that falls under this, like, don't do that. But I'm still going to do it. Any advice?
So one thing that actually I have 2 pieces of advice. One I might get into trouble for. So the one I wouldn't get into trouble for is the blogger who I mentioned, who has also been doing the in-class reflections. who really seems to be quite knowledgeable about this, recommends having students write papers in Google Docs, having you be an editor, and then you can see the history. And then at the very least, this is like the creating friction thing, like maybe they did have AI do it and they painstakingly wrote their outline and then like slowly filled it in, but they have to really be working hard to fake it at that point. And I think it will encourage some students to do a more careful job. So the thing I might get more in trouble for is that I actually pay for what I understand to be one of the best AI detectors on the market, which is called Winston AI. And Winston AI, W-I-N-S-T-O-N.
How much does it cost?
She's not paid.
10 to $20 a month, I forget. I'm co-editor of a journal, and we are using it at the journal as part of our official screening process because our colleagues are trying to fake it too. So anyway, I use that. I'm not allowed to fail people because of that, but I do inform students that I am going to do it, and then I inform them of the output. Winston gives you a range from 0 to 100, so it's not this, yes or no kind of thing. And you can use it to help inform your own read. Like you got this low human score from Winston, and I read this and it reads awfully generic. And this wasn't the topic you said you were going to write on.
Yeah.
And then I ask them, will you rewrite it? And usually they say yes. So those are two things that I would recommend.
And I would say, so first of all, expect it. Maybe think of the things that you think are acceptable uses of AI and which are not acceptable and spell that out for a student. If no other reason than that if you really get something weird, you have, like a structure for that. I would say, and again, this is easy as a writing teacher to say, and I know it doesn't translate necessarily, maybe some things that you've had them do on their own move into the classroom, right? So topic generation or, so things like that so that you can kind of like see them doing it a little bit more. And then, oh my God, it's gone. Something you said reminded me of this, and now I don't remember. But I think those a couple of things that way could be interesting. I know what it was. I know when I was in graduate school, or even as an upper-level undergraduate, it was kind of like write a paper about Chaucer, you know what I mean? And I think that really encourages some unfortunate behavior from students. But the more kind of like frictiony you can make an assignment that's still going to get at what you want, but might be harder for somebody to simply like put in and get a product could be useful. So even thinking about the way that you structure a question or how you want them to do research, I think can be helpful. So some things to think about. So.
Yeah, I would build on that with a couple of tips. The more structured you can ask for it, and of course that can still come out of a generative AI tool in some ways, but especially if they know how to ask the tool to use your structure as a guideline. The tools can really mimic that. Ask for more depth, like in the sense of, actual data, actual productions, and not made up things, productions of overview of graphs, of maps, or things like that, sort of actually doing the research and the evidence and sort of collecting that a little bit along the way of, like Kate suggests, maybe not, if you don't feel like you want to have them give you all, but actually using live evidence. And ask more, they now have more time. If they do use generative AI, they actually have more time to do the actual research. And so be more demanding, not in terms of like the number of citations, that can be reduce the number, but say, I want you to document what you use those citations for. And that leads me to the next recommendation, that increasingly faculty ask for a potential AI use to be documented or so-called disclosed, right? Now, that's giving us all sorts of, some then say, oh, I used AI, period, and others give you these reams of documentation. So being a little explicit about what you mean by documentation and disclosure is important. And then last but not least, I feel like rubrics. Like actually, we probably all at this point are using rubrics, but if you don't already have clear criteria in the rubrics and actual proficiency levels in the rubrics, that then allow you to judge what you have in front of you clearly without the cloud of like, oh, I guess this is just ChatGPT work, and say, okay, fine. If it is or not, maybe what I'm looking at is just not on par. You know, in that section that I asked about the reflection at the end, it's not there, or it's something that's just jumbled, you know, that's generic.
Yeah.
You can give them the grade they deserve for it. And so rubrics will help you be demanding legitimately without having to constantly second guess.
And so I wanted to add something that I think is implicit, or maybe maybe it was already explicitly said. You know, whatever your assignment is, I think having a scaffolded assignment, and again, this is creating more work for everybody, but it's a good practice in general. But having students, you know, first choose their topic, you know, maybe they write an abstract, write an outline, you know, get their research, like just having these incremental steps that, for a variety of reasons, makes it less likely. And one of the reasons is, you know, because they also procrastinate.
Yes.
Like, so many students intend to write the paper, but they procrastinate.
Feel this is the thing they're going to do.
Yeah. And then there's, you know, 8 hours to go.
Feel bad about it. You can, I mean, there are cheaters in classrooms, I'm sure, you know, as there are in life, but most students who end up using AI did so without intending. Like they bought themselves into it. They feel bad, shitty about it. So we need to kind of acknowledge that. Yeah, John?
Can I ask my fellow panelists and also the audience for advice about this question? When it comes to my oral exam, I said there were two options. The first option is I tell all the students in advance that there will be 20, you know, give them a panel of 20 questions, and then each student in the course of the exam will randomly pick, blind out of a hat, 3 of the questions and respond to those questions. The alternative is that they don't know in advance what the questions are, and I ask exactly the same question to all students. What should I do?
Who is for option A? Who is in favor of option B? I would also favor.
I would think I would.
Question, like
Yeah.
how much space is there
Yeah.
between exams? So like
Yeah.
if the 8th student has the opportunity to talk to 7 other people who are
Yeah. Right.
right? So
That's a problem.
Yeah, that's true. So that's against option B then.
That's against
Yeah.
option B.
Yeah.
Well said.
Anna?
Can I suggest a modified version of option
Oh.
A, where they pick randomly 3 questions and then they get to drop one? Or they pick 4.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, all right. So interesting idea, yeah. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful.
Is anyone going old school, like multiple choice exams, true, false, just more of those kinds of?
I have those integrated in my exams. There's
Yeah.
some multiple choice and then some essay, some short answer.
I feel like that's good in the sense that it's so quick to grade something like that, you know, which is kind of nice, you know, so not everything has to be like
Right.
these big
There's a lot
kind of
more work.
projects, you know, but it would get you get some pretty instant. I mean, one of the things that I was in grad school was a thing, if you really felt like classes weren't reading, was to do something kind of quick like that, or even just like write down the main idea, and you'd instantly know who was doing what. So I think it would be maybe not the only thing you did, but you'd get some answers from that. So
We have an additional question input there.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a question, DeMonica Jones in Health Studies, about the oral exams. I love talking to my students, so I love the idea of face-to-face, but I also have 90 students a semester.
yeah.
You have a small sample of 8. I can't do 30 minutes.
Yeah, so the feasibility comes
Yeah.
in big time. I have to say, I went to school in Geneva, my undergraduate studies. My professor did oral exams with all of us, the whole room. Just, you know, went through, they had a system, he had a note taker, he had a system. In a way, if you individually test, and I have a colleague here at SPA who says, I really spend less time on my oral exams than I do when I go through these long papers, you know. In truth, you know, if you kind of perfect the system, maybe the first time you'll be slammed around doing that, but maybe you find a system that works, that kind of has you churn through these exams pretty quickly. But I do think you then need a note taker. You need somebody, you need a rubric, you need maybe even 2 judges on the side or something, and possibly having it, filmed or something in case there's any appeals. And I have that in here, how to dust off matters aligned with learning objectives. Be mindful of accessibility, right? Like you would have to have granted extra time because maybe these oral exams of yours are going to be 5 minutes or 10 minutes, to make it feasible. Fairness, new vulnerabilities, new biases, or the biases we have may come back to haunt us. So we need to be mindful of that. So I'm glad you asked that question about how can we make this feasible. Second to last bullet point there, feasibility for faculty. So let's hope we have the support. If we go that route and dust off some of these practices, you need space for that, you need assistance for that, you need a place to document it, you need a way to save this properly. It needs to be predictable for students. So the version A versus B that John mentioned, I think is very important. You shouldn't be deciding this last minute. I'm for version A, or whatever modifications you want to do, but you need to tell them well in advance, here's how I'm going to do it, and then run it the way you intend to. And then last, yes, this documentation is really important. You can't sort of let that just kind of figure it out as you go. Go ahead.
Yeah, going back to the term paper idea, what I'm planning to do is have students, the way I had it before I came in here today was 0, 1, or 2 as to the level of AI that they're using. I may switch that to 0 to 10. And then the thought I had was then to have my TA basically run the question for all 20 papers through ChatGPT. Tell them, just spend 10 minutes, just read it. What do you think? And so when I start to read the paper, I've got what the student said and the TA said, and then I can, if it's truly completely reproduced from ChatGPT, you're great with that. Something like that. Any thoughts?
It's fairly easy to customize ChatGPT, even on ChatGPT, Claude, it knows all of your history. So for example, any chat I've had with ChatGPT, which one of my favorite things is just late at night ask it history questions to fall asleep. My whole thing is very different, right, than what some of y'all's are going to be. Yeah. So it's memory of me. Therefore, if I put that question in, it's going to give me something different, right? Because it's learned from me. And so that might have worked maybe a few years back, but they all are Claude's memory and stuff. So I would say it could be an interesting exercise, but it might sort of be there might be better use of your time.
Mm-hmm. And energy, some
Yeah.
students are also concerned about energy use of AI, so kind of frivolous energy use might be one that somebody would say, or a student of mine might have said, oh yeah, do you really need to use energy for that? I'm less concerned about that, but I understand some students are, or they also are concerned about sort of what we upload into whatever cyberspace we have, and so sometimes these kinds of curtailments should also be taken into account. We have 2 minutes. I just wanted to realize the slide I have up here. I talked about how we dust off matters. I walked through some of that. I do think it's important to realize within what conditions we include that. All of this only works for the purpose of stemming, dealing with, enhancing, or prohibiting AI if we do many other things. And so I have under conditions within which to consider these strategies is that there has to be clarity, intentionality. You have to repeat things often. The why, fairness, for example. Why we do this needs to be told to students. I think students really need more understanding and more coaching and more repetition about why we do what we do. And it's just the time we're in, so that's important. Supporting academic integrity more broadly in collaboration with students is also something that's helpful. Scaffolding and such to reduce the stakes. Maybe one draft and another draft, and you get points for both, and that kind of does both things at the same time. It's been very difficult about deadlines. I've become linear on deadlines, sort of reducing stakes, allowing, like Liz says, hey, do over, I didn't see this, what about it, and being able to reduce the stakes and sort of work with students, not because we don't trust, we don't think that they're capable, but because we know that they're more capable, and so kind of learning with them together. Having other AI friction, such as collaboration. I saw, John's example shows that that also is in the mix, and that's actually an anti-AI friction tool, is to have them collaborate. They don't dare sort of, misuse AI in front and with others. Using physical sources, pairing all this with reflections and maybe judicious documentation. Last but not least, building trust and having a bit of humility, all of us. And I think a regard for sanity. I think if we overdo wanting to stem AI, we can overthink this, and we can spend hours, like Kate, for example. That documentation that you're asking is wonderful because the students do the work for you. I have found myself wanting to do what you did, and I'm like, this is taking me hours.
When you have to do one of those on your own, it's like it's so hard. So they do it for you.
So on the right-hand side, you saw some resources. One great book that I wanted to recommend. And please, thank you for joining us. Do evaluate, tell us what you liked, if we should reissue that in some form. So we really appreciate your attention to this and engagement with AI. We could all grow tired of it and cynical about it. I hope you don't. It's a challenge. We embrace it. We live with it, or even teach it. So I think that's important.
And take advantage of CFE's resources.
Yes, that's right here. CFE resources are here on the right.